course. To get a full look at the
Oh, great. Awesome.
program of studies, and this is sort of the highlights.
Oh, thank you so much.
Top of the ones you're visiting this, or you don't know yet?
American. I made some appointments to so American and University of Virginia are
Good
my
evening,
top.
everyone. It's
Yeah.
February 20th. We're here for a Newmarket School Board meeting. I'm going to call the meeting to order, and let's do the Pledge of Allegiance.
Okay, you're still,
I
this
pledge
one's
allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it's one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
We have an agenda before us tonight. It's been published, and the first order of business is public comment. Is there any public comment? Doesn't look like it. So, with the board's indulgence, folks here that we want to, I think, move up on the agenda. So, I just the review of the FY19 audit, and we have representatives. Okay, here. Did I pronounce that right? You did. It's a good start. So, Bill, you please step forward. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Cooke. I'm one of the senior audit managers there. I come out and do the audit. I've done it the last maybe year 4 or 5. So we come out over the summer. We've done the audit. I'm not going to go into great detail. I know you have the financial statements in front of you. If there's any questions about anything specific in there, please feel free to holler. It's a lot of numbers, and to sit here and to try to go, it's not worth anybody's time. But I do want to just kind of go through the audit process and sort of what we do. It's not all just about the numbers. It's a lot of risk-based activity. We do a lot of talking to staff. We test controls. It's risk-based, so we look at areas that we think will be riskier. We always look at all of the classes. So we have cash disbursements, payroll, cash receipts, and what we do is we document. So what are the policies that are supposed to be? What's supposed to be happening? The procedures from literally when you get an invoice or even order all the way through to the end and paying it, what happens? And then we test those things and say, is that what's actually happening? Having a policy in place and then what's actually happening could be two completely different things. So we do a lot of those things. We test on a rolling basis, so we will always look at a little bit of everything every year, but then we do complete tests we do a much larger test over a larger sample every 3 years on a rolling basis. This particular year, we actually tested both payroll and cash disbursements. We had the larger test on both. If procedures change, or if people change in a position, or if we had findings like little deviations in the prior year, we will test it again to see if things have been changed and all that. So we did do tests on both of those this year. The most important part is that the auditor's opinion that you got is unmodified. That is the best opinion you can get. It means that we were provided with all the information we needed. Everything is included in the financial statements that needs to be there to make them fairly stated. So that's a good thing. There's really nothing, the financial statements as far as what was in here and compared to prior years, everything is the same. There's no new GASB standards this year. We've had a lot of that net pension liability and the OPEB stuff that have come up over the years, and they put these large, massive liability numbers on financial stability like panic, and they're required, they're unfunded, they're never going to be funded, they're just going to hopefully every year go down a little bit as things are funded through the state, through like retirement systems, that stuff. There is a new standard coming out for next year, which will be including your student activity funds. Those will move from what we've called an agency fund. We always just report what the balance is and that it's there and that you're custodians over it. It's going to get moved. Some of them will be reported now as as an actual special revenue fund of the district, and then we'll show the ins and outs, the actual receipts, disbursements, and that type of stuff, based on what their purpose is and all that good stuff. So that's kind of the big change that's coming up going forward. There's a few other letters that were with these. So we do an internal control letter. So this is what I was talking about with testing controls and those types of things. We did have what we consider two things to be, we call them significant deficiencies. There's two options, significant deficiency or material weakness. So a material weakness is if it's very large dollar values and it's causing your statements to be stated. We don't have that issue here. We just had a couple things that we thought, they're significant, they should be rectified and taken care of. So one of them had to do with direct deposit authorizations. So when a direct deposit for payroll gets released, there's supposed to be two people that are releasing it with the bank. The turnover in the business office, business administrators coming and going, that's the same person. So it's really just to control it. You want to have two people taking care of that.
So how does that work when an employee says they want direct deposit, they give
No, this is actually releasing like a pay run. So everybody's, most people have direct deposit these days.
Yeah.
So when the payroll is being processed for that particular week, and then it's being released to go to the bank, to come out of your bank and go into everybody else's bank, there has to be an authorization done at that level to release that. It's supposed to be done by one person, then another person has an authorization to do the second check on it. It was being done by the same person.
Is that something that happens every week or every payroll?
Yes.
Okay.
Yep, every time a payroll is done. Yep.
So the issue there is that the person that's processing payroll shouldn't also be authorizing the bank,
Right.
because then,
Duties.
Exactly. Yeah. And that's kind of what the second significant deficiency that we had was segregation of duties. There's one clerk in the office that's really doing probably more things than she should be. We see it all over the place in school districts. It's hard, you're running out of budget. Taxpayers don't want to give the extra money to, fund different positions, and it's a struggle. So that's why there's other levels of control, like boards are authorizing manifests and those types of things. Different things get implemented, but it's always a good idea to try to segregate as much of that. Whether it's you've got one person putting in a new employee and then the payroll clerk is, processing, keep doing the same job. It's just important to have as many checks and balances as you can, in any size district. And it's a struggle. We see it in towns and schools all over the place. It's hard to.
You would call it a security check almost.
Right, it's a check and balance. Right, exactly. It's just having multiple people with their eyes on the same transaction so that, it just doesn't give the opportunity for, one person to control every piece of the transaction start to finish, and then nobody's checking, nobody knows if something is going, we don't have everything we've tested, we've never come across anything like that. It's just really having the control in place so that doesn't happen.
That was gonna be my next question.
Yep.
If you've ever caught anything that was questionable in
Nope.
that regard.
The couple of things over the years that we've tested is maybe there wasn't a way to pay that was documented, so maybe somebody got a raise and it wasn't in their personnel file is documented that, or time card didn't put it correctly, those types of things. Certainly nothing where anybody is fictitious employee. And that's why, like your business administrators on payroll things, and there's different levels that people are supposed to be checking that. It's important, everybody takes that individual job that they've been assigned, very importantly to make sure that they are. Yeah, we'll just sign it off, but really, you're responsible for making sure, your supervisor, your principals, or whoever are responsible for, yep, those are the time cards, and that's where that person worked. Everybody has a step.
There's always those famous words, but this is how we've always done
Right,
it.
exactly.
We never needed
Yep.
that many. Why do we need that many?
Right.
That many people. Well, now it's 4 checks and balances. It is to so that person that is working up there, she makes one mistake, she owns that all
Right.
by herself. But if
I always say it's like their security. I mean, I would want somebody else checking my work,
then that
Yep.
person's responsible. That's just daunting. And then are we paying overtime as well?
we are now.
Yeah.
Yep. So it's just, it's right, there's just these checks and balances of, it's hard to want to hire another person or even find at this point, there's really a shortage in trying to get qualified people into business offices throughout. We've a lot of retirement. With a qualified person that can take those steps.
Susan, I think if I recall, early in the fall, we talked about adding some positions in to sort of allow for these deficiencies to be recognized.
We weren't adding, what we did is we had,
Not adding.
right, no,
Modifying.
we reorganized.
Okay.
So that we took the position we had, and then we designed the roles around being able to attend to these deficiencies. That
Right,
we had.
sometimes it's just a shifting of responsibilities, maybe there's the people,
Yes, no
maybe.
So the person, right,
Yeah.
so there's a person now that works, and Jack is here today, and he can talk to you about where we're at in that process, but the idea is that whoever is doing your banking should not also be able to access your books. The person that's running payroll should not be able to access your banks. Whoever's doing accounts payable shouldn't be accessing, bank accounts. That you have to segregate these duties, and then you have to have internal controls, or I call them double checks, or closing the loops, Those are called internal controls, so that there's points along the way that the work of others is being checked. And you do that because you're trying to minimize your exposure to fraud. Our exposure to fraud, and that's what they mean when you don't have segregation of duties, is that your exposure to fraud is great. And
Right,
so
I mean,
that's
nobody
what-
can ever guarantee 100% that nothing, but the point is to try to have controls in place to try to, they say, to detect, catch those types of things, things in place. And errors happen, yes, but is there a control in place that, hey, next week you go, oh, we realized that was wrong, and you've got something in place to fix it. It's not even that things never happen wrong. I mean, there can be mistakes, and they will happen. It's that are the things in place to actually catch those mistakes.
Exactly.
Yep.
So, sort of, if I may, just sort of related to this, like on the first, sort of the introductory page, I think it's the second to last paragraph. It to say that you're not doing an audit of all of our internal controls or expressing an opinion on that.
Right.
Which, as a board, what I wonder is we don't know what we don't know.
Right.
So what is perhaps a best process for making sure that, as a board, as an oversight body, that we do have the right controls in place across the board, and also that that they're being followed?
Right. Yeah, I mean, it's important to have the policy to start with. I mean, we'll see a lot of, very specific policies for cash receipts, and here's what needs to happen, and it's very detailed, and it's, all the way down to the treasurer is reconciling, just different steps, and then those policies are being communicated, obviously, to the staff training, those types of things. I mean, the audit we're not issuing the opinion on the controls, but it is still part of the process. I mean, we rely very heavily on that to make sure that the things are in place. Like, we don't just come in, tie out some numbers, and then leave. Like, this is a very big piece of that. So having an audit still is a piece of that. So yes, we're not, necessarily giving an opinion on the control piece of it, but it is something that's heavily looked at, and then we have these types of things.
You're not entirely blind to it. You have to you have to know what the controls are to do your work.
A lot of inquiry, we talk to a lot of people, and we rely on, we have questionnaires that we send to management ahead to the board, and, and we rely heavily on people telling us too, like, hey, not real sure about this area. Is this something we can look at? I mean, we can always do extra work in areas if there's, things. One of the things that's in one of the other letters is petty cash. It's very minimal to us. To us, we look at it as not material, to the whole of the financial statements. It's $100 over at one school or whatever. But the process itself, and, if somebody raises like, hey, maybe can you look at this? We can do additional procedures. We can look at other areas, those types of things. We look at the big picture. We can't look at it 100%. We would be here for a long time. It just isn't beneficial to do it that way.
Well, I guess what I'm getting at, I just wonder in your practice or accountants in general, beyond an audit like this, do you offer sort of a review of controls?
Yeah, if there's ever like a certain area that we had a district that was concerned about purchase orders being signed after the fact. It happens a lot. Like, oh, we need this. We need this piece of whatever. And they order it, it comes in, and they go, oh, we gotta sign off the purchase order. And they felt like it was being really abused, like in, custodial type stuff. So we went in and we literally just tested like 120 of their disbursements and traced all the purchase orders to see when they were signed and that. So we can do additional services and, you know, on specific areas.
This is
in
not,
more detail.
this is not to suggest any sort of proper,
Some people
yeah.
have had towns that like, hey, this year will you go look at our transfer station, and next year will you look at the camp, you know, the summer camp, like on a rotating basis, just to kind of, it's always good to, that people know that you're looking.
Well, and I just think from a governing body's point of view, it would seem that type of oversight every so often is prudent, because otherwise it's the folks who are doing the work who are sort of reporting to us what the controls are.
Right.
I mean, how do we know that,
Right.
you know, that there's an objective look at that
Yep.
necessarily?
Like I said, where we do the rotating, you know, we won't, if controls seem to be, that they're in place, we've tested them and there's not an issue, the next year we will say, hey, are the procedures still the same? Are you still doing, you know, did anything significant change? Do you have somebody new in there? If not, okay, we're gonna look at a couple, make sure that what you're telling us is still what's holding true for the couple that we've looked at. If we did it and found that there wasn't, that it was completely different, we would do a full test on it, so.
And there's other things that, so from our perspective, right, how do we know that internal controls are in place? So a couple of things that you would look at is, one, are you getting reports on a regular basis? If what they're projecting in those reports at the end of the year winds up being something completely different than what you have been looking at throughout the year, then that's an indication. If you have great variations without any footnotes or anything like that in particular lines, you know, that's another indication. Your flags should start to go up. If you're not getting warrants processed in a timely fashion, which we do here, you know, that's another thing. When you're processing and you're signing the warrants, do you see a second signature on those? You know, not yours, but like the BA, for
Right, there should be
example.
like the
So those are
business
some of the
administrator
things you want to
manager.
look at. Are those pieces in place? Because there's no way that you're going to be able to know. If you have, you know, the segregation of duties, so when I brought the job descriptions forward to you, and you see that the treasurer, there's somebody so you have an official treasurer that's elected.
Right.
But they're not doing your treasury function, right? So you have to have somebody that's, you know, managing your cash books and all of that, and those have to be reconciled. And when you get your reports from the BA, you should get a reconciliation of your cash that's signed off by the accountant and signed off by the person that's running your cash book. So those are some of the things that you would have in place, and if you're not getting those on a regular basis, then those are red flags. So those are some of the things. And then when the auditors come in and they're giving another opinion, so they're reviewing that. And they're determining whether, do they get all the information when they ask for it? Because if they can't get the information,
That's a red
you know,
flag.
Yeah,
that's a red flag.
exactly.
So I'm just saying, there's a lot of things, you know, that you would be looking for, would indicate to you that, you know, perhaps you're having some challenges here.
So you've been at it for a long time. So when you see a district or a town who has a problem or something beyond a mere error was made, what usually leads to that in terms of not picking up on it or allowing it to happen? Lack of internal controls, lack of following, lack of reporting,
Ultimately, it's just that
basically.
that nobody else is checking.
Okay.
That's right, and it's just kind of flying under the radar and, you know, yeah.
Yeah, it's not that
definitely
mistakes are made, it's that the mistakes aren't caught.
Right.
And that's what I'm saying. So if you're seeing some great variations in some area, you know, or something, you have a budget of, let's say, I'm just gonna make up a number, $100,000, and when you're getting the report, you're seeing the budget, but you're seeing $1 million posted there. You know, somebody's
Somebody should
clearly not
ask. Yeah.
checking something.
Somebody
You-
should ask,
I'm exaggerating.
But
Right,
sure, yeah,
right.
no,
Right.
even in payroll, I mean, if somebody was adding a zero onto a pay rate or something, and all of a sudden you're looking at that line where that person is charged and it's way over budget, there should be questions, like,
Right.
why is this? And then that's up to your business administrator and whoever to go back and do some research and be like, oh, you know, it should all, you know, there's just different levels, monitoring, they call it monitoring, those types of things, that you're seeing things and just asking questions, you know, it's part of the job of, you know, looking forward and all that, it's just looking at reports and, you know, is exciting. It's still important to look at all those things.
So getting back to, this is why when you came in, was it the end of the summer or the beginning of the fall and said,
Fall,
we
yeah.
want to reorganize the,
Yeah, we had an employee leave, and at that time, and when we didn't have had a different consultant from MRI, and so that was the time We have one retiree that hasn't been able to retire. We have another person who,
I
so
know, just
it was like we
you're
just
like,
didn't have any
yeah.
permanent employees. Then we lost the other one that was there. We didn't have a BA, and so this is the opportunity now. The audit had taken place. We had this feedback, to say before we post any more positions,
Right.
let's take care of the challenges that we have right now and then post, which we have.
We have the benefit, Susan, also of your vast experience in this realm of the house. So that's a plus that we can't ignore. So thank you for that. And I think that really gives us a different perspective, or gives me a different perspective on how the situation should be run in a way that I might not have known without your expertise in that area. So thank you.
Yeah, you're lucky to have a superintendent with business administrative background, so it's a nice double role there.
We interrupted you. I don't know if you
you're
had.
fine.
Yeah.
This is
Yeah.
why I prefer the conversations as opposed to my just kind of rambling through. The other one I was gonna touch on, so we have the internal control letter, but then we have what we call management points. So they're just recommendations, things we saw, just recommendations of things that maybe could be, fixed or just modified to be better. And they're not internal control findings or anything like that. So we had three points there. So one of them was a purchase order policy, was having a documented policy that purchase orders should really be used for all purchases. There can be blanket, purchase order if it's the same thing you're purchasing every month or, or whatever. Have a policy in place. So if emergency arises, what can happen? Like, you need to fix something that's literally, water pouring out of out of a sink somewhere. Go ahead and being able to take care of that and then remedying that and, filling out something after the fact if that's the case. But just having that policy, when we tested our cash disbursements, it was kind of inconsistent. It was, sometimes there were purchase orders, sometimes there weren't. It's just, again, an important part of your controls where somebody is approving the various purchases that are happening. It's not just blindly being ordered and then nobody really knows it's just coming in and being paid and then going out. So the purchase order policy, piece of that is pretty important to help maintain and track your expenditures. We had Safekeeping of Deposits, which was during conversations we realized that when checks and even cash, if there was some, there's not a lot of cash that would come in. When it was coming in, it was just kind of being put in a drawer, just wasn't locked up before it was deposited. It may not necessarily hit the bank that very day, if it's the end of the day and it's going to or whatever, it should just really be locked up. And I know that even since we were out here that a locked safe has been purchased and it's being implemented. So, and then the last one was the petty cash, and that was just that when petty cash was being reimbursed, the checks were being run through through AP, and it was just being made out to like petty cash, and then the AP clerk was just going to the bank, cashing those, and then taking it to the various schools and giving them their money, and they were signing off that they were receiving it. It's just not great practice. You don't want the person cutting the check, processing the check, cashing the check. It's just, petty cash is it's a tough area. So, it's limiting it as much as possible, or, having all the receipts submitted and then a check being cut to the person that is receiving it, and having them put it in is probably a better practice if you're gonna have petty cash. So, those were those two things. The last letter is just what we call a governance letter. It just sort of talks about what our responsibilities were, what your responsibilities are for everything that we've done, that there was no disagreements with management, and all that kind of pretty boilerplate and standard.
Okay.
About it.
Are there any other thoughts, questions?
I actually have a question. And forgive me, this is the first school audit I've looked at. So I would, it's just gonna be very simple. But on page 30, note 14, there's a statement about how some of what were fiduciary funds will require a classification as a governmental fund.
Yep.
And that could have a potential significant impact on the financial statements.
Yeah, so that's your student activity funds.
Oh, okay.
Yeah,
Okay,
so
so
that's
that's
right
what
now
you're
they're
referring to.
shown on, right now they're on page 7. So they
Okay.
kind of sit on their own statement just as an agency fund, that you're holding the funds, basically because you're holding them for the students. What'll happen is they'll roll over into it'll be a non-major governmental fund. So then then we're reporting all the activity. It doesn't change budgeting purposes, anything like that.
Okay.
It's just gonna change where they're reporting on it.
Okay, so it's just gonna look different next year, so we need
Yes.
to be aware of
Basically,
that.
it's where they're gonna be, and then more information will be reported on it.
Okay.
We test student activity funds every year anyway. We think they're kind of, an important area. We think anytime it's anybody else's money, you know, it's kind of like Little League and those types of things. So we test disbursements out of there, we test receipts, making sure that everything is signed off, that whoever's receiving it has said, yes, this is what I've gotten, that it's going to the fund it belongs. We've never had any issues with anything with the student activity funds here. We see a lot of discrepancies over the years, just not great controls over it, but everything, you know, we've never had an issue.
Thank you.
Anything else? Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thanks. And
Yeah, there's another item here, if I can call up Dave Jack.
Sure.
He's one of our two BAs. He's here 2 days a week doing the BA function. And then Rita Donaldson is also from MRI, and she's taking care of the finance and accounting side. But Dave's here tonight to make you aware of something that I wasn't aware of that's related to the way things are handled in New Hampshire at the end of the year. And I'm gonna let him explain it, and then how what happens at the end of the year then should be reflected in your next year's budget. So I'm gonna let him explain it, because I'm still absorbing it myself.
just thank you, Dave, for coming tonight, and thank you for helping us out here in Newmarket. Appreciate it.
We have a tendency to do that for communities. Thank you for giving us the opportunity to continue here in Newmarket. As Susan has said, there's two of us here. Rita Donaldson is a CPA. So she really, we divide it up in a kind of a little bit of a different way. She really takes care of the auditing pieces, the debit and credit end of the business. From my end, I operate on the expenditure and revenues, which is the end you operate on. I can't get over there, but it's nice when you have somebody with that expertise. It's really helpful, particularly when you walk into a situation and you want to ascertain where you are very quickly. As you've heard from the audit, from Jennifer, your audit, we go into a lot of districts. The things you're hearing tonight, you are pretty redundant in a lot of districts, same things. I think Newmarket, I think you are in fairly decent shape when it comes to having to deal with that. It's not unusual to have to deal with those things, and they'll repeat themselves. Purchase orders being issued after the fact, that's been going on for as long as I've been in the business, and I'm not going to tell you how long I've been in the business, but it's been going on for a long time, and we deal with that all the time. You can manage that from the BA position. You can manage a lot of that. And it really is around training and working with folks, and if you tell them what you want, generally you get it. They don't wake up in the morning saying, I'm not going to do it because I want to make the BA's office not have a good day because I'm not going to do it. But if you give them the training and help them with that, you'd be surprised how well it works. So, and the audit for all of us that have been in the business is really a report card at the end of the year. It tells us where we are. When you're looking at audits, a couple of things. I think it's on page 28, because I'm going to focus on a couple of things. On page 28 of the audit, there's a couple of important numbers. And I know you know, and I know somebody's been here, and I know that you've been doing it for years. But the one number I want you to look at is under the general fund, $531,283. Is that on page 28 of yours?
No.
Yes.
It's right here in the left column.
Left column.
Got
At the bottom.
Mm-hmm.
That's your unassigned fund balance. That's what really was left over at the end of the year that you used to set your tax rate in October. So anything that is clearly unassigned at the end of the year, and I'll get into things that were left over, but they were assigned so they couldn't be used to that goes to reduce taxes. You treat that like a revenue when you go to set your tax rate at Department of Revenue Administration. So that's an important number. We always want to know that number. The state would like us to know that number by September the 1 every year so we can file it on our when we do our DOE 25, which is the end of the year expenditure reporting. You would always, that's the number that we're all looking at. If you don't have that number, then you don't get an appointment to set the tax rate. The town is not happy with us, and so consequently, and it's a little more difficult when your audit occurs after that date. If you don't get the number through the audit, then you have to have a number to go there with. So it's important that you can internally you can get there. You've been able to do that, I think, fairly well, which there are districts that aren't able to do that, and so that number varies, and it doesn't cause a whole lot of problem because it catches up the following year, but that's a number you really want to look at. The other number that I'm going to speak about tonight is the number above it, which is encumbrances. So in New Hampshire, at the end of the year, any business that's in mid-transaction, not a PO, that for any number of reasons just didn't get completed. It might be some sort of facilities piece that because we were in session, we couldn't do it. It'll get done in the summer. Those types of things, the purchase orders are rolled forward. So for you this year, it was $158,687 got rolled forward. When the first quarterly report went out this year, I think you had an Excel spreadsheet earlier in the year that went out. The $150,000 was recognized in the expenditures. It needs to get recognized in the appropriation, the adjusted. So it really increases the budget that was approved last March by that amount. And the way it's done is the $158,000, those monies were available in your bank account, let's say. You had the money there. They were appropriated. So that money really just gets moved forward to this year, both the revenue and the expenditure. When your report was given to you, it didn't move the appropriation forward, which means that you've got $158,000 worth of expenditures with nothing budgeted. That's what it was saying. That is not the case at all. So when you get the next quarterly report, which will be, I think, second meeting in March, I will have incorporated that in there. If that will be reflected in there so that, and I didn't want to do that and you folks look at it and say, what's going on? Our budget increased. We tell you ahead of time and then we can just put it together. It doesn't make any difference in our cash flow at the moment because it's there, but it will truly state what's going on, and that's why it's a lot more transparent to the process. Usually what happens is that number is arrived at sometime in July of the year. You usually notify the school board. You can take a vote on it, but there'll be some sort of notification that that's what we're carrying forward. And sometimes you might ask, what is that that's carrying forward? And then you would go through and indicate what the purchase order, just do a real brief presentation as to what that entails. And it would be within your realm. And it's a lot more transparent. There's no craziness going on here or anything like that. It just is a good way to do business. So that really was the part that, when we looked at it, we thought that the better way is, rather than us just doing it and you seeing it, and then you're going to say, well, you should come and tell us why you did it. I'm just telling you up front that we're going to do that. And then that should be in the cycle every year to have that done.
And if we had had a BA here during that time, we would have had somebody to ask that question. You would have had somebody to ask that question. So really, last summer we didn't.
It's a unique thing to New Hampshire.
Yeah, that's
It's
another
not
thing.
something
Doesn't happen
that
in
anybody-
Massachusetts.
Yeah.
Or I think any place else that I'm aware of.
No.
But it's a unique thing. But what Dave is saying is that when we get to the end of the year and those things can carry forward in Massachusetts, if you haven't spent it out and expended it by, like, literally issued a check to the company by the 15th of July, the money's gone. Here, if you've entered into a contract, this is my understanding, if you've entered into a contract, before the end of the year, but the contract hasn't been fully executed, you can continue to carry that forward. And that's why that encumbrance is so important, because it's held in abeyance from your prior year appropriation. That you were obligated, the appropriation was in last year, you agreed to spend the money on it, the contracts have been issued, the POs are out, and so it makes perfect sense when Dave explained that to me, so the process would be, at the end of the year, when we get to the end, I guess, July, that the BA will come to you and say, these are what the encumbrances are that we're carrying forward into the next year, and so that would be added to whatever is approved at town meeting. So you'll be able to see, it's town meeting's approval plus what's left from last year's appropriation. And then we'll know that those two numbers together make up our appropriate, because right now, as Dave said, what happened was without, me knowing that and having no BA, I didn't know that they had expenses from the prior year in our current year budget expenditures, and that's what happened. So the money was expended out of this year's money, but the revenue piece, so to speak, or increasing the budget part to account for that wasn't done. Because, like I said,
It's not, it's simply put, it's not that any more is being spent, it's just where it's reflected.
Right, you
Yeah.
you haven't done anything to increase your budget, it's not a transfer, it's simply in most situations, different types of software are treated differently. So if you were looking at an expenditure report, you'd see the original budget, and that would be reflective of what was voted on in March the 10th, on the second Tuesday in March. You'd see that number, you'd recognize it. The next column over, as you move to the right of the page, might say adjustments and transfer, and then the third column will say the final budget. In that middle column is where in most cases, is where you're gonna see the encumbrance get rolled into. And then it gets rolled into a place where at the end of the year, we can report it correctly. So it's in the right accounts, everything's there. So when we report to the state at the end of the year, you don't have to do any adjustments. It's rolled right in there. It can be done different ways, but that's the whole gist of it, of what's going on. Again, it's having worked in both states, for someone to come here, and that would not be something that you would know coming here. I started here, so I knew that. But for Susan, it would look, why are we carrying encumbrances? Because it does not happen. And again, it changes from state to state.
Well, it's good that's the only thing New Hampshire does differently.
If I could comment just on a couple of the points that Jennifer brought up, I think all of the pieces that are in play right now as far as the findings, if you will, that Jennifer had talked about earlier, they're all resolved. You'll get a report. I'll include that because we didn't have them at the time when we were setting out the board packet. But they're all, we have a resolution or a suggestion, a recommendation. I've worked with Susan on how we're going to address that, and it really boils down to the reconfiguration of the office with the 2 additional pieces will allow you to segregate. And the other pieces, such as you didn't have a safe to store stuff in, that's been resolved. In an audit, the beauty of it is the auditors are really kind to us. They'll have a finding, but if in the interim, in the next year, they find that we've resolved it or we have a solution, then it's going to be part of the audit, which is, to me, that's pretty important because it means we recognize what the deficiency was at the end of the year. And so by the time we get here, which is about 8 or 9 months after the year ended last year, we have the resolutions going forward. So I think that's pretty important, so that none of those findings, I don't think, are not being we have the capability of addressing them all. So, or you have that capability.
Can you, Dave, just give him an update on the search? Again, these are not new positions,
Yes,
they're
and I
unfilled
apologize for saying
positions.
Reorganization, I misspoke.
Yeah, they're unfilled, open positions, I should say. It's not that they've gone unfilled, they have gone unfilled now, but we've had people in them before.
So
if
you
could just give an
have
update
2
on that.
positions. You have an assistant to the business, administrative assistant to the business administrator. That position has been filled. It's an internal movement. So that position, that's not a problem. And the second, the senior consultant, that one is in the process of being filled. We're just going over the reference checking at this point. We have a candidate. I'll probably deal with either tomorrow, probably before tomorrow, or the first of the week, and hopefully that gets resolved with the idea that that person might be able to be on board, if you will, in a month, which would be pretty significant when you can get fully staffed, and then you can begin make the workload much more manageable with folks. I mean, you don't want to have workload and everybody that's up to here. You'd like to have it down, around, just where it's manageable, but at the same time, if something comes up, you have some capacity to take care of it. Right now, it would, given that you're not fully staffed, when something comes up, it really makes it difficult to find who can do it or give the necessary focus on that piece of work that you have to have done. But I think once you do that, I think you're going to be in a lot better shape. And every place I go, the accounting piece is huge. I can't emphasize enough, you almost have to have an accountant on site for what we're asking between the financial software, the reconciliations, the end of the year closeouts. That's why, in a lot of ways, that's why MRI continues to have a significant amount of work. That's just not always possible. A lot of districts, we have some folks that can do that work with us. And so we do that kind of work. But I think it's pretty important that you put that in. I see more and more districts having that position and looking for it. I've been in 3 or 4 this past year, and each one of them have done that, or else they're dovetailing it now. The bigger ones will go to an assistant business administrator with an accounting background, and it becomes to do some internal training in anticipation. If there ever is an opening, you have some place to go. We can always help, but it's always nice when you do that. And then the last piece is where it'll really start to pan out is when you fill the business administrator position. I mean, that's key. That really is key, and the ability to put someone in here. But the good news is if you're fully staffed, it becomes more attractive for that person.
Right.
Questions?
Well, I'm listening to just, all these things that we're doing, and then I realize, because when you're in this office, you realize the phone rings all the time. So they're doing all this, plus trying to manage the phones, plus dealing with just personnel. Like, there's all those moving parts. So when you hear people say, why do we have so many people in the SAU office, spend a day in here, and you can see the moving parts, and you can hear the phone, and you can understand how the checks and understanding the checks and balances that we need to make sure that we're running the right way. And I mean, I'm glad we did this tonight. It makes a lot of sense of helping it.
And I'm grateful to the team that has kept us afloat in the way that they have and have left us with, some areas of deficiency, but not very significant ones. So I appreciate that as well. And the deficiencies are already corrected, so
Yeah.
we're doing all right.
I mean, we had, when I say they're corrected, there's a plan. They'll actually become fully collected when we're fully implemented.
Okay.
Aside from the BA, position of the BA, once you have those other 2 positions in place with people in them, you'll correct all of those, because while we're here, we'll do the BA piece. And then it'll just be when the next person comes in, that'll get taken care of. So I mean, it's a good, it is a, for a district that hasn't had a full complement of people, you've done really well. I mean, we see a lot of things, so. And I'm sure Jennifer would say the same thing from the auditing standpoint, that they do a lot of different districts. And certainly there are some that are better, and there are some that have more things to deal with than you have, so.
I really appreciate it.
Great. Thank you, Dave.
Thank
All right.
you.
Okay, and next, moving up on the agenda, we're going to hear about the employees.
Good evening, how are you?
Hello, Sean.
Sean?
Good. I just wanted to take the opportunity to recognize the people who formed this committee to look at the program and studies. It was headed up by Jen DeStefano. That's right, yeah. I always say DeStefano. I put Greek to it. Chris Bisson from Guidance, Kristen Ebro from Guidance, Delene Rosenberg, who is a member of the staff but is also doing a lot of work towards her admin degree. So she took on some of this. Kristen Kiefaber, Greg Soster, and Mark Levitt. This was well underway when I came into the building. They've spent countless hours doing this. They've refined it for you. You have it in front of you here. I'm going to turn this over to Jen so she can kind of explain the process, and she has better information and more of the details for you than I do at this time. So again, kudos to Jen and everyone that I mentioned here. It was a long process, and they devoted many hours to making sure that this is a really fine product for you in the district.
Thank you, Sean.
Hello, everyone. You all have a complete draft of the proposed program of studies. It is still in draft form, so if you go through, there may be a couple or grammar punctuation errors that we still have to go over, and so don't judge us on those, but because it is still draft form. You can peruse that as you like. I've also provided you with sort of a memo that hits the highlights, so it's a summary of what the work that we've done, and then you can delve in more detail at your leisure. So the Program of Studies Committee, we've really been working since the fall on revising the program. It's part of the junior senior high school's academic goal, and it is a multi-year goal. So ultimately the goal is that we create a rigorous, engaging, relevant vertical pathways that exist in all subject areas that align with students' post-graduation, college, and career aspirations. And our goal is to have that in place about 1 year from now in January of 2021. So this year's work was the first step, and basically it focused on reviewing our current offerings, making both additions and deletions to the program to help us towards that goal of a relevant, rigorous program with solid vertical pathways. So this is just the first step. As we go through the visioning process next year, we'll revisit things such as graduation requirements, the district's values, the vision of the graduate, et cetera, and that will require information from a larger group of stakeholders, including parents, students, community members, families, teachers, so that before we make any really big overhaul, we want to make sure that we get enough information and gather enough data and really think about what we're doing so that we can be thoughtful and intentional. So this is really just a first step. There were sort of two pieces to the work so far this year. There was the academic piece where we worked with, first we started back in the fall at a staff meeting asking teachers, what are some classes that we don't offer here that you would want to teach? If you could teach we asked them, first of all, when you were a kid, what's the dream class you wish you could have had when you were in high school? And then we asked them to think from there as to what's something that they would really want to teach. And we gathered their information, and they generated a huge list of ideas of things that they would like to teach. So we then conducted a survey of all the students, the high school students, through advisory, where we gave them all of these options that their teachers had come up with and asked them to rank them in the order that they would be interested in. We also put together some focus groups that were made up of students from grades 8 through 11, so that would be next year's high school population, where they then talked about the classes. They were asked, what kind of things do we offer now that you really like, that you want us to continue with, and what are some areas that you wish we offered. And the kids had some really fantastic ideas. Put all that information together, the teachers' input, the students' input, the discussions from the focus group, and presented it all back to the staff on our February 5th Professional Development Day. And then we set them off by their departments to look at all of that and whittle it down to some offerings that they saw as possible for next year, and then some offerings or changes that they saw for the next 2 to 3 years. So what we have come up with, we'll go over in just a moment. The second part of the review was really spearheaded by the guidance department in collaboration with the Program of Studies Committee, and that was reviewing academic policies, not necessarily course offerings. So in the beginning of the program, you'll notice that's where we have our policies about add drop period, changing your schedule, taking courses through VLAX, extended learning opportunities, distance learning, things like that. And a lot of them were very vague, or had a lot of caveats for ways that, with such and such as permission. And we didn't want it to be so amorphous. We wanted it to be very specific so that it provides consistency and equity for all students, so that, every student will be treated the same and treated fairly. And it takes away a lot of the personal, and it just says that this is how we do business. So we wanted to make sure that we went through that and we reviewed it and spelled it out. So the counselors really took the lead on that. And again, as we go into visioning next year, that's when we would talk about if we want to make changes to, the number of credits to graduate, or what the actual courses are that the kids need to pass to graduate. So I think this is a good first step. I'm super impressed with the amount of work that the teachers and counselors accomplished. As has been stated, I've got 2 counselors that are working their tails off, and they had to put in an extra, we've probably spent 30 to 40 hours in the past 4 months working on this, and they're doing that in addition to making their appointments with students, getting ready for the course selection process, all of the other things that they have to do, helping us to administer the PSAT to the entire 10th and 11th grade back in October. So there's a lot of work that they do, and this was in addition to, but they were outstanding. Same for the academic teachers that worked with us and led their departments through the review process. There were a lot of really great, thoughtful conversations. Sometimes people not knowing things about, for example, one of the courses that we require of students to graduate is chemistry. All students must pass chemistry to graduate. But in terms of our mathematics, we only require that students through Algebra 1. And if you know anything about chemistry, it's virtually impossible or very, very challenging for you to pass chemistry if you haven't studied beyond Algebra 1. So that's kind of the inconsistency that people didn't know existed. The science teachers were like, what do you mean they're not in Algebra 2 when they're sitting in my chemistry class? Because that had really just never been discussed. So that's led to a thought about, well, is this the right alignment? Is this the right sequence? What do we want? So I think a lot of those discussions are going to take place next year as you go through the visioning process. Okay, any questions so far? Okay. The notable changes are sort of starting at the bottom, and I'm just going to go the very last. One of the things that is going to be a big but not big change, currently our students take their major subjects, for example, English. They would take English 9 semester 1, and then they would take the second class of English 9 semester 2. But they're actually recorded on their transcripts and earn credit as if they were 2 separate courses. So there's a possibility that a student could pass the first half of the course, fail the second half of the course, and then next year have to repeat, but only have to repeat that second half. So that might mean they would start the year in September, and then all of a sudden mid-January, in this English 9 semester 2. And it causes a great deal of disruption to the student's schedule. It's also quite a scheduling nightmare for our guidance staff. And it doesn't necessarily make good educational sense.
Is that how people are ending up with multiple Englishes? Like, would I also be in English 10 when I'm adding?
Correct.
Okay.
So that's what we were going back to, is we do feel that this is contributing to our matriculation issue, and that it could benefit. Because, for example, a student, if you added up the 4 quarters divided by 4 and that was your average, depending on the order that you got your grades, you might, if you got an 80, a 60, an 80, a 60, and divided by 4, you would have a 70 average and you would pass the class and earn 1 full credit. If you had an 80 and an 80 and then got a 60 and a 60, you would earn a half a credit for the first semester, but no credit for the second semester. So you could actually get the same 4 grades, but just depending on the order that you got them, you could have only earned a half a credit versus a full credit. So by combining those core subjects and putting it into, I've never seen a semester system like this before, so I was having to ask people to explain to me why do we do it that way. I ask why a lot. And what they had said to me is that they thought at some point when failure rates were uptick, it was thought that by doing this it would give kids a chance to at least earn a half a credit. But I think the unintended consequence of that is that I think it's actually contributing to our failure rate rather than remediating it. So that's going to go away, and it will also eliminate the situation where we have some students who right now maybe red A, okay, so we have red day, black day, they might have their English class during red A. And then when the second semester comes along, because something gets added, they're no longer in the red A, but they're in black C. They might be with the same teacher, most likely, but they're plopped in with a whole new group of students. Anyone who's taught knows, even though you're teaching 5 English 9s, they're not all gonna be in the exact same place depending on the makeup of the class. And it just seems that that's a really precarious situation to put a student in, January 27th and expect them to now, pick up where they were. And if it's a situation where perhaps you failed the second half of geometry last year, and now all of a sudden in January you haven't thought about it for a year, we're gonna say, oh, here you go, you gotta finish the second half of geometry. It really doesn't seem fair or feasible to expect that kids would be able to do that. So that is being changed going forward to next year, and we're hoping that that's gonna help to adjust some of the issues with matriculation.
And will you discuss this too when the new parents into the high school? Because I guarantee you, that I sit here and we do this. I've done this 7 times now. I cannot remember when we changed that to a half semester. I don't remember doing that, but it explains so much. That 25% makes sense when you think about it the way Jen just explained it. So now will parents understand that? So they're not thinking, well, how will I know my kid's getting all his needs met? And
we are planning a parent night for March 6th, I believe, where we're March 4th at 6 o'clock. That's it. March 4th at 6 o'clock, where we're going to make a very similar presentation, myself and the guidance counselors, to any parents that want to come, so they can learn about some of these updates as well as the requirements for graduation, being aware of the requirements, for example, to go to a 4-year college, because that is different than our current graduation requirements. And if you're a first-generation college student, your parents may not know that you have to have had 2 years of a world language to be eligible for a 4-year college. They may not know that if you haven't taken Algebra 2 in high school, you are pretty much not eligible for a 4-year college. So we want to make sure we're educating people on that, so that they're leading their children, along with our guidance counselors, down the right path for them to get wherever it is that they hope to end up after graduation.
The clarification of the policies and making them concrete and consistent across, that will probably help with this sort of issue that you're talking about, where you're like, when did this happen? I never remember this. Sort of. If it's all clear.
Yeah, and my understanding from talking to veteran staff is that there hasn't necessarily been a lot of outreach to parents in the past. The schools that I've worked in, we've always had a curriculum night around this time of year, where you start preparing for course selection, so that parents can come in and hear, so that they can help to advise their child. We would also do a separate one for students who were entering grade 9, so that there would be a time to really focus on those first-year issues versus the upperclassmen who are a little bit not as green at making their decisions. So I think as we move forward, the plan would be to have a lot more dialogue with families and students, so that they understand not only what the policies are, but the rationale behind them, why we want to do things the way that we would want to do.
Yeah, that dates on a lot of people's schedules.
I hope to see a good crowd. I hope to see a good crowd.
And I think, Jen, as someone who has an 8th grader who's going to be a freshman next year, who did not have a student go to the school at that time, another student at the time, it's been very intentional from her standpoint as a student, what her requirements are, checking in with her teachers to see what, and all those different things. So I think there's definitely conversation in the school with the students about these things.
Absolutely.
And I think it'll be helpful to have the parents sort of get up to speed in case they haven't been hearing it from their kids, but it has been happening.
Yeah, Miss Ebro, who is the middle school guidance counselor, does an excellent job of working with the 8th graders for 8-9 transition. She makes a folder for every student where they develop their 4-year plan, where they choose the courses they want for next year. They conference with their current teachers for recommendations as to what courses they should be in next year. So she really is doing a lot of work. The 8th grade team is doing a lot of work with the kids. But your daughter is conscientious and is thinking about it. Not all kids are in the same boat.
Exactly.
Not all kids have parents at home that are as comfortable with it as you may be. So, it's important that we think about all of the kids and that everyone has equal opportunities. We wouldn't want a student to miss out on an opportunity simply because they or their parents didn't know that it was an opportunity.
I think
like
we have
say, we don't know what we don't know. So it's
I think we have to remember also that some parents have school anxiety or had tough times in their own schools, so it's sort of anxiety and fearful to address these things.
Absolutely.
So the more information they have, the better off.
A lot of parents who may have had negative school experiences themselves are not comfortable coming and asking questions.
I still have that dream that I'm at the end of my college career and I've missed that course I need to take.
And you find out when they take away your
I
cap.
Right? No, they show up at my job and say, hey, you actually can't work here.
We made some modifications to the add drop procedures that will reflect that now shift to full year. So there's no add drop at the start of the second semester, other than if your electives are changing. Most of the electives are half-year courses, so if you finish gym first semester and you're gonna transition to health for second semester and you decide, I wanna wait on health because I wanna take piano now, there's still an opportunity, a very short window to do add drop there, but it won't. Right now, our counselors from December until now have been making schedule changes for kids for second semester. Because, you know, all of a sudden I need to be in semester 2 of chemistry, which means my English now has to move, that bumps out my piano lab, that means I can't, you know, do this, this, and this. And they're having to rework students' entire schedules halfway through the year. So you can only imagine how disruptive that is, you know, for a 14 or 15-year-old kid to be, I used to be in your class with all of you peers that I'm comfortable with, and now I'm in a whole new class. You know, that it's going to be quite jarring for a lot of kids. So that will be not an issue any longer.
And also not good for teaching.
No, absolutely not.
Because the teachers have gotten that cohort of kids, you know, to a certain point in their journey and curriculum, and now a new student gets dropped in, even if it's from another section, because you're not ever going to land on the same day at the same time, because, you know, there's teachable moments along the way, and sometimes you'll take your class into something, especially on the fall year ones, that are, you know, would normally be covered in the second half of the year, but this teachable moment, you journey there. You journey there because the kids are with you on that moment, you know? And so if the kids take the journey there, that means that you're not taking a journey in a different direction, but you can make that up in the end. This cutting everything in half has really created a lot of disruption for kids and for teachers, and makes it incredibly challenging to, you know, make sure that every student, you know, completes the courses in a timely fashion and gets adequate support for themselves. Because you can only imagine if a kid's coming in and let's say they're 2 weeks ahead over here but 3 weeks behind over there, and you've got 20 kids in your classroom, you know, there's a lot of makeup work you're going to have to do to get that kid where the other kids are. And so it just, it's just incredibly disruptive for both students and staff, and can be very discouraging. If you come in and you're a kid, as Jen said, and you get dropped into a class that maybe is 2 weeks ahead of the class that you just came out of, well, then you're going to be discouraged. And so, you know, all of these things, we're learning the reasons we've had this, you know, this matriculation challenge with our students. So, in essence, the long and short of it is that you've kind of created 2 master schedule seasons instead of 1. And when you do that, and kids are just shifting and shifting and shifting, well, you're never going to get to this, you know, progression of courses that lead you in the end to meeting all the graduation requirements. You know, it's going to make it increasingly more difficult to get there. You'll be scrambling in your senior year every year, or a good portion of kids. I think there was another 25% that were struggling to meet the graduation requirements. Just simply because of this hodgepodgey way of trying to move through, you know, your high school learning experience.
And the way that students' transcripts end up reading, rather than just saying English 9, you know, 80, it says English 9 semester 1, 80, English 9 semester 2, 95. So it's like 2 different grades, but there's not really a final cumulative average for how you performed in English 9.
And how many parents look at the transcript?
Oh,
Let's be
probably,
honest,
I mean,
right?
none, until you're to the point maybe where your child's a junior or senior and is getting ready to apply to college. Because the transcript, it doesn't really mean anything to you as a parent. You get the report card, that gives you the information that you need. But when we print out students' transcripts, I mean, I've been for 23 years. I can't read some of the transcripts. I can now, but when I first started, I was like, I don't understand this. What did they get in English? Well, they got a 90 and an 85. I'm like, well, how can they get a 90 and an 85?
So is
Wouldn't that be an 88?
When they're applying at schools, is that having an impact?
Well, they look like they take a lot more courses than other kids because they're earning a 0.5 at a time instead of a full credit. So, colleges know how to read all different kinds of transcripts because schools do across the country do things differently. So I don't think that it would have an impact that way. But it's just very, I've never seen anything like it. So it took me a while to learn and understand. But the idea of, failing half of a class and having to retake a half of a class, it was just really foreign to me.
But it does have sort of an impact. So I interview students for UPenn that are in the area, so they have this outreach. And so when I'm looking at the student's application packet, that kind of stuff can be confusing. What do you mean in English when you got an 80 and a 95? What the heck does that mean? Did you get a B or did you get a, what does that mean? So I think it can
Right.
in that way.
And then they're each calculated separately into the student's grade point average. So I think it creates multiple of potential for errors and inconsistencies and inequities. So hopefully by doing some of these things, we're going to peel back those layers so that it can be a much more streamlined, easier to understand process for everyone involved.
A lot of classes are cumulative
Correct.
throughout the whole year too, so to have it accumulated and say past the second half, but not the first half, but you would have needed to get there.
Right, and as we talk
to have to go
about,
back to it again,
Right.
it does seem not
as we
efficient.
talk about competency-based and standards-based education, it's supposed to be what can you do by the end of the course. If you couldn't do it in September, but you can do it in June, then you get credit for being able to do it, right? Because new learning replaces old learning, and you continued to practice and get better. But the way we're doing it right now wouldn't reflect that, right? So you could do terrible the first half of the year and fail and not earn that half a credit, and then really, come for extra help, bust your butt, do all what you need to do, and get a strong grade the second half of the year that would have been enough in a 4-quarter system to pull you over the edge. That doesn't allow you to do that because that first part of the year is closed off to you. You can't go back.
It's kind of demoralizing, isn't it?
Yeah. That's why kids get so discouraged. I mean, like Jen said, so then you failed, let's say, the first quarter of whatever this is,
Yeah.
math, English, social studies, or whatever. You can't take that until it's offered the next year.
A year from now in September.
Right. So you're not gonna, that content's gonna be gone. You're then gonna go on, let's say, first of all, if you didn't pass in the first, it could be more challenging in the second, but like Jen said, that doesn't mean you can't recover with the proper supports and everything, but then you'd still have to go back and you'd have to take one over again.
Which eats a block of your schedule. It prevents you from taking something else that you may be interested in that would be that hook for a student who, maybe isn't thrilled about coming to school every day. So.
And then you throw SST into this.
Right, because SST, eats up chunks of time during the day when we can't schedule kids. So if you're a kid that's in SST who failed the second semester of geometry last year, starting it halfway through January, we're trying to adjust your schedule to get the geometry in when you already have limited number of blocks that we can schedule you anyway. So it becomes really very challenging for the students, for the counselors, and for parents, because then parents don't understand, what do you mean my kid can't get this class that they want, or why is he now in Black C for chemistry? That doesn't make any sense to me. And they're right. It doesn't necessarily make sense, and they don't understand. And, as a parent myself, I look at it and say, well, what would I think if my child came home with this? And on this side of the desk to try to explain to them why we're doing it this way, when they're right, it is inconsistent, it doesn't make sense. So, recognizing that and making the adjustment is where we are now. So that's how it was, we recognize it, we're making the adjustments, and we're moving forward. So hopefully this will help some of that. So the add drop procedure will reflect that. We are modifying policies related to VLAX. I know that we've talked a lot about VLAX over the course of this year. We really want to limit VLAX to only students in grade 11 and 12, and we only want them to be able to earn 1 credit from VLAX per year. So that would either be 1 full year class or 2 half-year electives. We're also going to work on writing a more detailed handbook for VLAX that would have an application that they have to get signed off by us, that has to, explain to them that it's their responsibility to get their transcript at the end of the course and submit it to us so that we can add it to their new market transcript. So we want to make it a lot, again, clear, so that we do have more consistency. A lot of kids and parents don't know what they're getting into when they sign up for VLAX. And now it's halfway into the semester, the kid hasn't logged in enough or hasn't been able to keep up, so VLAX. And now they're not in the VLAX class anymore, and they can't join our class halfway in progress, so now they're going to be short a half of a credit.
I have a question. Don't know.
Correct.
I have a question on VLAX.
Sure.
Does it have to be core classes? Can core classes be solely teacher-student in
Yes.
the classroom?
So what will be in the VLAX, and this is just a summary, if you go into the book where there's more detail about it, we're saying anything that we offer at our school cannot be taken
Okay.
on VLAX.
That's the way it
Yeah.
And
always
we will,
was.
and we'll be offering all courses required for graduation.
In the school?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. Yeah, and that is stated if you look in the
Okay.
the full document. And we're going to also write a whole separate handbook before the spring. So when people start working on that, they'll know exactly what they're getting into.
Because this online, I mean, you know, when all of us went to high school, there was no online anything.
Right.
Everything was in the classroom, especially the core classes, most important.
I think it seems to me, from what I'm observing, to be sort of something that took on a life of its own and kind of slipped out of the control, and the amount of students and the amount of VLAX courses that they're taking. I mean, we have some students 3 out of 8 classes over a 2-day period because they're either in VLAX or they're doing an independent study, which isn't a bad thing, but that's also another class that they're not part of a class. So there are some kids who, out of 8 blocks, are only sitting in classrooms with our teachers and their peers 3 out of 8 blocks.
Are these VLAX courses, do they go along with the school semesters or quarters? Do they have a cutoff as to when you have to finish them?
So, well, we have reached out to VLAX and have been doing that this year, but in the past, no. So a student could start the VLAX class in September, and if they didn't finish it, if it was a half-year class and they didn't finish it in January, they just kept working.
Okay.
But it was never reflected on their grade. So this year, what we did is, you know, at the beginning of the year, we spelled it out, and if you were in a half-year class and January came and you hadn't finished it, we gave you a grade of I or incomplete.
Okay.
Which has implications on
Right.
eligibility for sports, eligibility for extracurriculars. So, you know, obviously the kids were not happy about that. But it's something that holds you accountable to completing the class.
Right.
You know, I have another student who failed biology in the year when he took it, signed up for VLAX biology, didn't log in enough times or whatever, VLAX dropped him. Now he's going to be finishing his senior year, and he's not going to have completed biology because he missed the opportunity. So right now, here's a student who's looking at being in that hole next year as a senior.
He's gonna take biology and chemistry next year.
I don't know if he's passed chemistry somewhere along the line, but he's going to have to be taking biology as a senior and needing it to graduate.
Will that be in summer school this year?
If our budget is approved and we
Oh.
have summer school, there most definitely will be in summer school this year.
Good point.
Yeah, we're hoping for that. We eliminated some classes that really had been in the program but were sort of like fossils. No one had taken them in a really long time. The teacher that taught it, you know, has left and no one else ever picked it up, so we weeded those things out. The program of studies is a living document, so if it came along next year and somebody was like, hey, I really want to teach this, we can always add things back in. We sort of cut everything that we cut and put it in a separate document so that if it comes back, we want to add it, we won't have to rewrite it, we can just copy it and paste it back in. And the most exciting part is that through the work led mostly by Delaney Rosenberg, we have 18 new elective courses that we would like to implement in the high school next year. We're excited about that, and it's courses that teachers are excited about and that kids have told us they want to take. So that's another thing. Get kids to fill electives and they're like, there's nothing I want to take, I'll just take something in VLAX. So again, this is to combat that as well. Of course, the offerings will be subject to change based on student selection. You know, if only 2 or 3 kids were to choose a course, we obviously wouldn't run it. Or if for some reason, funding or staffing isn't able to support it, we wouldn't be able to. But this is really kind of our dream for next year. So in the art department, we're looking to add the art of stained glass, an intro to painting, and an intro to theater.
Can I go back to school?
In the digital literacy, we're hoping to add a music production class, and the courses that are marked with asterisks would be team taught or cross-curricular. So this would be a cross-curricular between the music department and the tech department. So that's where you would have kids doing digital music, using software like GarageBand to create their own beats, create their own mixes. It's really something, DJing is a big thing for a lot of kids, so it's something that could really attract some interest. In English, we're wanting to add a creative writing and a nonfiction true crime class, and also a co-taught class through the history and English department, the quest for equity through history and literature. So that would be looking at the journey of traditionally underrepresented minority groups in this country and talking about how they have progressed in gaining access to equity and equality through the historical lens and also through literature. So that's something kids are asking for. Equity would mean, women's rights, minority rights, gay, lesbian rights. There's a lot of kids that they want to see themselves represented in our curriculum, and this gives them an opportunity to do so. Mathematics, AP statistics, music, the guitar lab.
Wait, you just went by that real fast.
Oh, I'm sorry, AP statistics, not as exciting to me as the other things. AP statistics.
Kids want this?
Some kids say they want it, yes. With AP, the caveat with AP is you have to have a teacher who has gone through the training through the College Board, and they have to submit a curriculum to the College Board that will be accepted by them. So the AP ones, those are going to might be a little dicey because we have to make sure we have a staff member. There are training opportunities over the summer to get trained by the College Board. They go to like a 3-day institute where they learn about the expectations of AP, and they have to submit a curriculum for approval. But there are sample curriculums that you can just adopt. So it's exciting, and I think there were some kids that were asking for it.
Yeah, I think it's about $500 or something to go
For the training, it's not too much.
And then
one
you'd
of
send them, sometimes it's like in New York, so you'd send them there for 3 days. When they get done, they work on their curriculum. It's if somebody hasn't taught the AP course yet, we would definitely, I'd put it in a grant or something like that, to give them the opportunity to go down and prepare and get ready over the summer.
Do you find that there's interest among the staff to do those types of things?
Yes, when we asked staff for proposals, and then we laid those proposals out to the kids and asked them to rank them in the order they were interested in, and then we brought it back to the staff and said, this is what the kids said they want, give us your final verdict, and this was what they gave back to us. So there were other things that were proposed that nobody seemed to latch onto. So those aren't there. I know there were some other things in the maths and sciences, and it's just that were really niche, right, specific things that somebody was interested in, but not enough of an interest. That doesn't mean that going forward we couldn't explore it again, but starting off here, we really wanted to come out with some high interest courses that are also going to be rigorous in nature.
And you can see as you go through it, it reaches, there's something in here for every child.
Yeah.
I mean, whether it's the arts, whether it's the sciences, whether it's our high flyers, or the kids that, are maybe, want to go in a different kind of a pathway. There's something for every type of a student here, so.
In the
Chinese
music
Mandarin
department. In the music department, the kids were asking for a guitar lab. We have piano lab right now, but guitar would be an opportunity for kids to learn to play the guitar. Our music teacher was over the moon about having the opportunity to teach that. In the physical education and wellness, we're hoping to have yoga and mindfulness, as well as a nutrition and fitness class that talks about healthy eating, as well as how that impacts you as you get older. In the science, again, kids were asking for AP biology, earth science, astronomy, the criminology and forensics, which would be a co-taught course between science and social studies, so looking at sort of the forensic science as well as the criminal justice piece that goes with it, and genetics and biotechnology. Social Studies, American Liberties and Rights, that would be an upper level course for juniors and seniors that would really be looking at the Bill of Rights and other Supreme Court case law into what our liberties and rights are as Americans. So that would be probably a little challenging. Current events, that would also have a big focus on media literacy, being able to read things that you see in the media and determine the credibility of the source, understanding bias in sources, and being able to keep up with current events, but in a manner based on facts and knowledge, and not necessarily some of the garbage that is out there in the internet and such as that. And in the World Language Department, Chinese Mandarin 4. And then we added descriptions. These are things that we've had but just never wrote a course description for, which you're not really supposed to teach any classes in your school that are not in your program of studies. These have been going, but they haven't been adequately described, so that would be the Study Skills 1 and Study Skills 2. Those are mostly special education services for students on IEPs that are receiving a specific curriculum related to skills and strategies for their particular disability. And reading and word study is taught by the reading specialist. So those are just courses that have existed as services, but we wanted to create some actual descriptions for what goes on in those classes.
That study skills, is it almost like an assisted study?
So it is like, some districts might call it academic support, some might call it skills and strategies. It's for students in special education. Part of it is we have a curriculum that the teachers are expected to deliver that has to do sort of with self-determination, goal setting, understanding my particular disability, being able to read my IEP and understand what accommodations are. And then also there is time built in there for the teacher to assist the student with academic support if they need it, making up tests, working on projects, if they need help with their homework.
Extended time.
Exactly. So those are the highlights of what is in our new program. We're very excited about it,
It's exciting.
and I would love to answer any questions that you have.
So, great, all these are great, all these classes are great. You're going to have seniors that have been doing VLACs and have been stuck in cubicles. Who's going to have access to these first? Are you going to say, seniors, step up, take what you want, and then?
Normally, when you do scheduling, that's when you run the requests, you run them from grade 12 down.
Okay.
So normally in elective courses, seniors do have first preference to those unless, if there's a required course that they have to take and it's a conflict, they might not be able to, but yes, usually electives, they get top down.
Okay.
So freshmen don't, they have a pretty prescribed program anyway. Sophomores, hopefully you can get into at least one, but by the time you're a junior and a senior, you should be able to have 2 or 3 courses a year that are something that are elective based for you, something that you're interested in and want to do. So, any other questions?
I think another thing that you'll see is the work that they've done around calling out for parents and students. If you turn to page 7 of the program of studies, we did a lot of work around clarity so that parents, we tried to take it from the lens of a parent and a student. When you're in your lower school years, in other words, freshman and sophomore years, what is it that you should be focusing your course selection around? Because if you can, it's just like when you go to college. The first 2 years, you take courses that are kind of your base courses, and that frees you up so that you can take more and more and more of what you love and might be interested in, because you will have all the prerequisites necessary to take the whole offering of the higher level, more rigorous courses. As Jen said, if you haven't taken Algebra 2, really hard to be successful and enjoy chemistry. So, we tried to do, a little bit of rework here so that it would bring more clarity and simplify what it is and call out things like, in your freshman and sophomore year, if you're on a four-year college track, although it's not a graduation requirement, it will be eventually here, but it is not right now. So that can create some confusion, you know, that you want to take in your freshman and sophomore year a world language because they just got off the back of their middle school years taking mandatory, you know, languages from an exploratory standpoint. So for them to then jump in and start taking language in their junior year after they have, do you see what I'm saying about the, you know, you want to have vertical, you know, continuity that leads you to ultimately what your goals are when you leave. So we think that, you know, a lot of this work that was done, and I've said this to you before, a lot of the work that's been done, and thank you very much for your leadership in this, Jen.
You're welcome.
We wouldn't be here right now if it wasn't for your leadership, so I want to publicly thank you, Delaney, and the committee for your work here. That people don't see this, the amount of work and effort that has gone behind doing this, researching the VLAX pieces, putting together a handbook for the VLAX, all of these are going to bear fruit next year. When I say we're doing things this year to ensure we never find ourselves there again, these are the kinds of things. And the amount of work that's necessary to get us here, to have, you know, something that's clear, you know, simple, straightforward, with appropriate boundaries for all people to understand. It takes an awful lot of work to get there. So I want to express to you
And passion.
And passion. It's been, you know, this has been a great effort. The faculty have, you know, are really interested in teaching these. This is exciting when you know that there's some support. We have funding in the budget, you know, to the community. In order for us to be able to deliver on this, we have to have the budget next year. We're able to do this because we're going to get, you know, these additional positions, so.
So that would, you know, obviously have an impact if that wasn't to happen, but, you know, we're very hopeful and very excited about it. And I would also, she's not here, but I would like to publicly thank Kristen Eberl. She's the middle school guidance counselor. She's one of probably the longest serving veterans in the building at this point.
Yep.
And even though she is not part of the high school, she was an invaluable resource in doing this. Chris Bison is excellent, our new high school guidance counselor, but it's her first year in the building as mine. So the two of us were going to Kristen's expertise for the history and the background quite a bit. So we couldn't have done that without her work, and she works very hard. So I wanted to make sure she was acknowledged. And Delaney is amazing. It's really amazing.
Yeah, we have some really great staff here. We really do.
If you guys want to publish some of the reading lists for some of these classes,
I'm
people
sure
at
as
home
we
might,
get
like, I'd like to
going.
know about the equity class.
I know, I was a history teacher before, and I've been wanting someone to teach that class since I haven't been in the classroom for the last 13 years. I'm like, why don't we teach a class like this? Why don't we teach a class like this? And I finally got some people that were like, yeah, that sounds awesome. So I'm really excited about that one. And we're gonna hopefully get teachers working together during the summer to co-plan and create some scope and sequence and syllabi rather, that they'll be excited to teach in the fall. So tomorrow is really the first kickoff of the course selection process. We'll be having grade level assemblies in the morning tomorrow for students entering grades 10, 11, and 12, so rising 10th, 11th, and 12th graders, where we will share this with them. They're going to get a sheet with their options that each grade level will get a sheet that's been specifically tailored to them for what options they have available to them. Obviously, if you're a sophomore, you can't choose to be in 11th grade English, so that's not even on your paper as an option. We'll go over those. They'll take the forms home so that they can talk with their parents over break. And when we come back, the first week that we're back, Ms. Bison, the high school counselor, will be going to all of the English classes to talk with the kids about their choices and get them to enter them into Infinite Campus. And then on March 6th, our goal is to press, as we keep calling it, the magic button on Infinite Campus that will start to the very first iteration of our master schedule. And our goal remains that all high school students and teachers leave on the last day of school with a copy of their schedule for next year. And if changes need to be made, there will be office hours over the summer, barring a tweak here or there if something happens. But we want folks to know what they're going to come into on the first day of school so that we can start, business as usual and hit the ground running, because I know that was a major concern for a lot of folks this year. So we're not sure if middle schoolers will be able to have their schedule before the end of the year, because that is actually a second master schedule that we have to create, and we want to prioritize the high school because the middle school kids, unfortunately, they don't really get a lot of choice
I was
and
gonna
a
say,
lot of
'cause theirs is pretty
elective.
much set.
Theirs is pretty much set. What ends up happening is creating the sections so that the kids are in the right groupings.
Right.
And then because we do share our unified arts teachers, like phys ed, art, music, they teach in both middle school and high school. Scheduling them can be a little tricky to make sure that they're available in differing times. So, but that we will have set before the kids come back for sure, but the high school, hopefully everyone's gonna leave with that in hand before the end of the school year.
Great.
You're welcome. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Jen and Sean, thank you so much, and it's a late night too, so we appreciate it.
Oh,
No, it's great.
Well,
Yeah.
we could keep you up here.
We-
for that.
well, I love talking about this kind of stuff. It's much more exciting than some of the things I have to talk about.
Well, then we get to do that March 4th, that we can ask you more.
Yes.
Oh,
March
yeah,
4th,
that
at
would
what
be
time?
great. Thank you so
March
much.
4th at 6
6
o'clock.
o'clock.
We have to, sorry.
You feel like you're the very first student.
Yeah,
Have that
thank you.
idea.
Yeah, I'm excited to hear even more tomorrow. So,
Yes,
yeah.
no problem. Speak up and present to all of you tomorrow.
That's great.
I know, I'm not speaking for the whole board, but I do just want to say that was the best part of my day. It's
I
very
concur.
exciting. It's
I
very
think it
exciting.
might have been the best part of mine as well. And then, I didn't even go off on, the great thing about AP statistics is it's an AP class that requires no prerequisites. So if all of a sudden, as a junior or senior, you decide you want to stretch yourself and try an AP class, statistics is one that you can enter at any point.
That's good.
So,
Good to know.
all right.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right.
Oh yeah, definitely. Yeah.
So let's go back, Taylor. We'll go with your report.
So, Model UN is holding a donut fundraiser tomorrow morning before school, just to raise a little extra money. That's coming up. It's going to be March 4th to 7th, as we've already presented to you. We're hoping to, we are going to the UN, but we're hoping to meet with the ambassador of Tanzania, which is the country we're representing. So that would be exciting if we got to report that back to you after. The swim and dive team had states last weekend. We did really well, considering this was like our first time we've had a lot of people go to states. The girls came in 9th overall, and the boys came in 17th place overall.
It was awesome.
And that's really good, considering we only had 3 girls who were there that qualified for states, and only 1 boy who qualified for states. So that's really cool. Amy Benson placed 2nd for girls diving, and Jewel Mazarias placed 3rd for girls diving. Isabel Pentany placed 7th for the 200 free and 6th place for the 100 back. And the girls 400 free relay placed 7th overall. The girls varsity basketball, their Division 4 prelims are starting February 24th at 7 p.m. and it will be a home game. They're not sure who they're going to play yet, just because they need to see who's going to win and just how everything works out with that. Boys varsity basketball, they have a game Tuesday, February 25th. At home at 7 p.m. versus Portsmouth Christian Academy. And as Mr. Stefano kind of touched upon, juniors and I believe other grades as well will be having an assembly tomorrow. Course selection, juniors is specifically during B block, so that's exciting. And that's all I have to report on.
Great. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right. And school board committee reports. We had a building committee meeting earlier this week. Everything is still on track for completion of the 1925 section in the high school by towards the end of March, maybe a move-in date at early April. So that's still on track. Everything else at the high school is still on track. They're going to, over February break next week, for anybody who's been in the cafetorium, there's a part of the flooring that's undone. They're going to finish that next week. They're also going to finish the hallway out in front of it. At the elementary school, they're going to redo the wing down towards Joanne's room, because remember the flooring in there was kind of bubbly, and they're going to strip out all the old stuff, refloat it so it's smooth, and then put down the same. This is not work that we're going to pay for. It wasn't done as good as we wanted the first time. So that's going to take place over February break. We did get a letter from DES. Folks might recall that we had towards the back of the elementary school property, like sort of in back of those new sheds that are out there when you're taking the access road. there was an open issue that we've talked about at the building committee about potentially needing to remove some more soil. It looks like we're gonna need to do that. It's about 17 yards. It's something we budgeted for. And we kind of didn't know which way that was gonna go. We issued through our consultant sort of an appeal letter to the DES, but they're gonna have us remove that. That'll take place, obviously, when the ground thaws, and not disrupting school at all. So that needs to be done. I mean, it's something, we have finality on it. We were factoring it in anyway, so that's it on the building front. Are there any other committee reports? Nothing? Budget's all done? Okay. Dr. Givens.
Yes, so, as usual, Taylor likes to steal the thunder, so.
She left.
But, a couple of things that she didn't mention that I will mention, is, of course, this week has been our Read Aloud Literacy Week at the elementary school, and I was there before, our school board meeting tonight, and, great attendance. Of course, I don't know what typical attendance is, but it was really, awesome to have families there and our teachers reading, stories to the kids and little activities for them to engage in. So, I was very pleased to see a good turnout there, a family and students along with their teachers. So I wanted to give a shout out to that. Also, of course, we had our primary election last week, and we had 6 students who devoted quite a significant amount of time supporting that, and I just wanted to mention their names. So Brendan Barnes, Nicholas, let's see, I don't know, let's see.
Berthium.
Sam Freed, Navia Couture.
That one's tough, just Navia.
Couture.
Hayden Russell, and Mitchell Tilton. So all of them, devoted a good portion of their day to supporting the election, and I love it when they're engaging in civics. And of course, you also received in a recent email from me the fact that the students participated in a mock election, and there's other opportunities to be able to follow the election process along, looking at little debates, and then participating in the presidential election in the end in November. So I'd like to give a shout out to our efforts to create citizens that are familiar with our democratic process, and so I'm pleased that they participated in those activities. So other than that, Taylor covered nicely some of the other events, so I won't at this late hour repeat what she already reported to.
And I don't know if we have it on here, but Susan led I'm losing track of the days, Tuesday, was it?
Oh, yeah, I think we'll
You got that?
we can cover that
You got it? Okay.
Committee
discussion.
update.
All right. And so, chapter 3 of the book, roles and responsibilities. A lot of this stuff is starting to sound familiar to us by now. I think we addressed some of this role and responsibility material at our retreat, but I think it's reinforcing to hear it yet again. And what I took from this article was, there's a movement among school boards and superintendents to work more as a team rather than sort of as an oversight body and a chief executive. Yet, we need to recognize the difference between, sort of management on a day-to-day basis and governance, which is our sort of, area, in the importance of swimming in our lanes, making sure, that we're not in each other's. Now, this article concedes that sometimes there's gray areas. But I think what's important there is that you have mechanisms in place to discuss it, so it doesn't become an issue, and there may not be a clear answer to it. But if you have the proper culture in place, you can ride through those waves. There was a quote in here that I circled. Yeah, okay, how do you break it down? Well, if you had to sum it up, I thought this was good. Is the issue one of management, or is it one of governance oversight? You know, is it a day-to-day issue? Or is it, you know, but we both, some of these things we both contribute, like, what is visioning? Well, that's part governance, it's got to be, have a day-to-day aspect to it, you know, because it's got to work too, but it's kind of a shared responsibility, at least I gather from logic and reading. So, and there's a nice list on page 40 about things that are of you know, management day-to-day things versus governance. I thought, and I think, you know, not a really good job here in the, you know, in the past years about staying in this lane. You know, certainly it's been a focus this year, and I think it served us well.
One of the things I was thinking about, this would be a good book to give people when they come and sign up to be on the board. When they sign up and they say, I'm willing to make this commitment, if this book is given to them, there's a running start into what exactly this entails. So when they come in, they're not surprised to find out that's not your lane, you need to stay over here.
Yeah, I mean, I think that there's a lot of myths out there about what a board does and doesn't do. A school board, what they do and don't. We're not involved in the day-to-day personnel issues.
That was the one that I liked. The school board member's role is one of governance, oversight. Education as a profession dictates that employees must have appropriate education and licenses served in teaching and administration contract roles. As board members come from all backgrounds, many which do not include licensure, or studies in education, this means that board members do not operate in an administrative capacity.
And this is nothing peculiar to schools either. I mean, corporations have good functioning, well-functioning corporations have, you know, if a board was, you know, sticking their hands down and making, you know, personnel decisions where they're not there and they don't really realize all the dynamics, it would turn into a huge mess. So you've got a lot of highlights.
I do. Well, I narrowed it down to notes, and I was going to echo what you were saying. That was we have read about role separation and what the different roles of the board versus superintendent are before. But what really struck me and I took away with it is that the point is that we have backgrounds in all sorts of things. We are not educational experts, even though we might do some education, you know. But in general, we can have any sort of background, and that's important because we bring a different perspective and we might ask different questions and that sort of thing. But we need to leave the managing of the day-to-day operations to the experts. So the administration, the teachers, and not get in there and micromanage them. That was kind of what I took away from it.
One of the things that I thought of was, and it's something that I underlined, school boards have one of the most difficult jobs in public education. They provide governance oversight for everything within the organization, but they manage, in our case, one person. And I think when we go beyond that, or as Mike said, if I am on the Ford Board of Directors and I say Henry on line 2, what would that makes no sense. So it's the same thing as me making any sort of personnel recommendation or thought about an employee in our district. That's outside my purview. And, you know, I think it's important for us to be successful to think about these things, you know, have us really focus on the oversight. And I think, you know, this year with things that have happened, the public might not understand fully what our role is and what our information is. And I think it's important to remember that we have one person that we supervise, that is that person sitting there, and she deals with everyone beyond that.
And, you know, it's also a cultural thing too. At the company I've worked at for several years now, our owner, really, of the holding company, gives every employee a book every year. He gave us one this year. It was called "It's Your Ship: Management Techniques from the Best Damn Ship in the Navy." The author was Michael Abrashoff, and he was captain of a destroyer in a battleship in the Pacific. It was the worst performing boat at the time. And within a year, he turned it into the best performing boat. And it was largely because he got out of people's way. And there was a morale problem. But when he got out, he listened to people. He got out of people's way and let the right people do the right jobs. It just turned things around. I mean, he couldn't dictate what to do, but he stayed. He was the commander of the ship, but he stayed in his lane and he empowered people. And I think if you don't do that, if a board, for instance, puts their fingers down where they shouldn't be and are meddling, that's demoralizing. It's disempowering. It also, I think Susan would probably say that when she's doing her job and for folks down below her and trusting those people to do work, and not, it's all the way down the chain. And I think the culture probably, if we're doing it here, it's easier to implement, down the chain. Good read, by the way, easy read.
And there can be implications too. If we get into a point where we are going into our lane, there are results of that behavior that may not even be seen right then, but maybe in future things can happen.
That was a good chapter, a good reminder. Anything else?
So we might want to consider getting those, and sending them to people who signed up, like, this is a good idea, this is what you're in for, this is just one book.
And I think along with those lines, some of these professional development activities might be appropriate for some retreats,
Well,
not all of them.
Didn't we do this one? Or maybe it was the last one, we did retreats, that's why when we're reading these, it's like, oh, wait a minute, I know the answer to this.
It's a good reflection.
Yeah.
Well, there was one, I don't know if this is the last chapter or the chapter before, it made me a little uncomfortable. Like it was like, what is that, when you fall backwards into?
Oh, the fall, yeah.
Yeah, something like that.
Oh, trust fall.
Yeah. Yeah. So, all right, moving on to committee updates, communication.
Communication committee, the website and communication committee. Did you want to start? Do you want me to start?
We can go back and forth.
Okay.
We had a great week.
We did. We had our second meeting last week, really productive. 3 groups of folks worked on 3 different projects, and we're already seeing the results of them. So we had the first forum, that's what you were talking about, on Tuesday, where Dr. Gibbons came in and started out with a presentation and then answered a load of questions about the proposed budget and how it's made to, how it's designed to support staff and students and give them the supports they need to be able to do their best jobs.
Student success.
Yeah. So, there will be another one of those.
March 7th.
Which is a Saturday at 10 o'clock.
In the
cafetorium. So spread the word, everybody. We got some good feedback from that.
Yeah, it's a good place to get your questions answered.
Right. And then there was another group that was that had created a survey about what people in the community want from the website, and that went out earlier this week. So that went out in a number that I believe it went out to the community. It went out
The
to
school,
Blackboard, so it went out
right.
to staff and parents. And then I believe it went out
through Infinite Campus as well.
Okay, yeah, so for students. So, we've already gotten quite a few responses on that.
I think the first couple hours it was out, there was already 114
Right,
responses.
Oh, wow.
Which is wonderful, thank you. So we want everybody's feedback. We want everybody's feedback because we want to make changes based on what people want and what they need. And instead of what we think they might need or might want, we want to hear. So, and that will be closing on the first Friday in March, which is
The 6th.
6th. Yes. So thanks. So on the 6th,
Got some time?
Closing. Send out reminders as well. And then that next week we'll be looking at the data and turning it around and sending a report back out to everybody.
Right,
who's
and
interested.
again, this is a good chance to have a say
Yeah.
in what's happening, because you read, I didn't know about that. There has been enough information put out that everybody should know about it,
And the
be able to
committee
have answers.
worked on this survey to make it also quick.
yes.
So it should take about 5 minutes. Unless you wanna go on, cause there's open-ended questions too, so you can, we really wanna know what you have to say. So that went out, and then the last piece.
The infographic, which has the proposed budget, the default budget, and the amount of the yearly increases, the differences, what the budget entails, just some bullet points, instructional improvements. What else was on that? I've looked at it so many times.
Yeah, it was really helpful.
Well,
really,
yeah, and
yeah.
it's the highlights for what the.
What the budget
proposed
entails.
Yep.
would provide. That, we gave that, a copy of that, or a version of that out
At the forum.
And then, we just added it to the website. It's in recent news on the website, on the SAU website right now. And it was also, emailed out through Blackboard, I believe.
The email has a link to the graphic and a link to the
The
budget.
full budget too. So if you want more details, the full budget's there as well. And,
We're working
and-
on having it go out to the town as well.
yes.
I did send it to the town administrator to have it included in the town newsletter.
Oh, okay, thank you.
I did that yesterday.
Great.
I don't know if it's gonna be, it may not be tomorrow, but it'll be next week and the week after that.
And our next meeting, we haven't,
We're working
We're
on
working on-
scheduling it. Yep, because of vacation, it's gonna put us off a little bit. We might break up into two groups and work on smaller projects. But we're working on that right now, so.
Thank you so much for all that work
It's been great.
and good results. Yeah. Entry plan committee.
You can start. I was late, so I'm going to let Kim start.
We've had 2 meetings so far. We have a small but mighty committee of people who are very committed to doing this work, who have been on time and thoughtful both times we've met, and we have decided that we're gonna meet all 4 Wednesdays in March and address one area of data that Susan has compiled at each meeting. Newmarket School District is today. And then we will create a report from that and send it out to everyone at the end of that, so we can see where we are. Obviously, that will then help prepare for the visioning process. Here's where we are, here's where we might want to be, and then Susan and the community and the stakeholders will help us formulate a plan to get from A to B, or A to B, or whatever it ends up being. So, is there anything that I'm missing, Elizabeth?
No.
No, I'm very grateful for Joanne Lazarus saying that she would join us and having her perspective on that as an educator from the elementary school and the union president. So I'm grateful for that and for the team at large.
It's always, I love when we can talk and have questions answered. So I've enjoyed it.
Yeah. So we will be meeting all 4 Wednesdays next month.
I look
Hours.
Thank you.
forward to those reports.
We might call on you to help us analyze data at some
Yeah.
point.
You have to.
A very nice blend on all the committees of community members and, folks inside of our organization, board members. It's been great.
Yeah, and you said, good job, we've got some good stuff out, but we've got these great parents, teachers, helping us get this stuff done. The communication committee is stellar.
We're kicking it, yes. We worked hard last meeting.
It's exciting to see how excited people are to do this work
Yeah.
and how willing they are to share their honest thoughts and hard work and time, because the things that you guys produced this week that we've all seen took time from citizens, and it's amazing.
But
And you guys.
it's borne fruit already. I mean, I was at the forum on Tuesday. I mean, there's nothing that replaces talking to somebody across the table and finding out what's really important to them, and really, to get people understanding real information, and there were misconceptions that were cleared up. There were, people got to answer questions, which we always can't do that here in this setting. That was great. And Susan and I went down to a group of folks on Moody Point on Monday night and did maybe a mini version of the same thing. And again, it's invaluable. Folks were very enthusiastic and wanting to hear about things, and also wanting to volunteer and help out. And boy, the more we can get out and do that, the better. I mean, I think that's where you can really, and I know we'll be doing lots of it, through the committee process and through the visioning process. But that's where you can really, really find out what's important to folks. And it takes everybody pulling an oar too. So the more people we can enlist, there's so many talented people around that can help. So
There's so much work to be done, but when everybody just chips in a little.
It's not bad.
yep. Thank you.
Thank you.
So the last three committees.
Yeah, so Culture and Climate Committee has been very, very active, meeting again weekly. They were responsible for part of the professional development day that we had, and the other committees that are listed here were responsible for the first half of the full day we had. But I mentioned that, I think, at our last meeting. But since then, we got together and we, put together a survey that we could send out to staff to get their feedback on how they think things went. We had lots of people approach members of the committee, so that committee is, I think, 18 strong right now. And great feedback from staff that they felt it was very worthwhile. One member reported that some teachers had said to them that it was, it's the first time in a long time they didn't feel like the PD was demeaning to them. That they thought that it was helpful to bring everybody together, to have conversations and learning, to look at our profession and have professional conversations about things that are important to us, and then also to enjoy some time to build some community, amongst the staff. So, I think that that was well received. And we just sent out a doodle poll and have scheduled another 5 meetings from now until the end of the year. So our goal in that group is, if possible, to be able to identify what our values are as a faculty, and some expectations based on those values for how we'll interact with one another, expectations for how we'll move forward up into the next school year. So we're very excited about that, a very enthusiastic group. Again, a lot of work is being done by a lot of people who care deeply about the students here, the schools here, and I'm very grateful for all the work people are putting forward. As you know, one of the two junior, senior high school groups is the POS. You can see the fruits of their labor, here. So that's very exciting as we start to see really tangible products, as whether it's through the communication or any of these other groups. It's very exciting to see tangible work being done. The scheduling committee had their first meeting this week, and they have scheduled meetings out for the next couple of months. And then the student services group that's going to look at programming and, the handbook, at least pieces of the handbook, that's going to start up the week after we get back. So lots and lots and lots of exciting things going on in our school district. At the elementary school, they continue to move forward with their literacy group and looking at the tiered intervention program there. So we're on target. People are excited. I think people are also a little tired and looking forward to having next week off. Relax, rejuvenate, and re-enter. One other thing that's not a committee per se yet, but I wanted to give a little update on the principal search. So we had, quite a few folks interested in participating, which was great. And so I've gone through and started to sort through those to put together a committee, and we'll be notifying folks, next week, although I won't be here. I'll work with Penny to get letters out to folks one way or another. We had way more people than we could put on a committee, so unfortunately we're not going to be able to have everybody join us in that portion of it, but I also want to reiterate that there are other opportunities to provide input and participate, and one of those is NESDEC has completed a survey that I'll be sending out to staff and the community tomorrow, so they can start to, tell us a little bit more about, what they're looking for in the next principal and what, characteristics, qualifications they would like to see in the next person. So that will be one way that folks can give us some, their thoughts, share their thoughts. Also, the focus group dates have been set, so in addition to doing surveys, NESDEC will be here on Friday, is it the 6th? The Friday after we come back. I think it's
March
the 6th. Yeah. And they're going to be doing focus groups with students and staff on that day. And then the parent one is going to pair with the forum that we're going to do on that Saturday. So it'll be a two-for kind of a thing. So parents don't have to come out a couple of times in 1 week. We'll have both of those. So I think our educational forum starts at 10. I think we said 10.
10 o'clock.
So maybe we would have the others start at 9. And provide NESDEC with, their thoughts if they didn't do the survey, or if they did do the survey and they still want to talk to NESDEC, that's fine too. But I just wanted to let you know that those things are all kind of queued up, and I'll be sending that out either today or tomorrow, so that folks over the holiday or the break can, respond to that. Once all this feedback is gathered, they'll come up with a profile, and I will announce who the committee is, the screening committee will be, after the break, and then they'll get together, once they have the profile, and start doing workshops with NESDEC. They'll go through the process of selecting the candidates that will be interviewed. The interviews, I'm gonna guess, are gonna start maybe the 3rd week. The ad's been placed, they've been actively recruiting people, and I believe it's something like the 13th or 2nd week in March when the ad closes.
Mm-hmm.
So we're launched, we're underway, a lot of work being done there, and wanted to give you an update on that. Also, just for the public, there'll also be opportunities to meet the candidates, the finalists, and then you'll also be able to provide feedback and your thoughts about the candidates when they come and do a site visit here. So a lot for public input, and just wanted to mention that, so that if we aren't able to include you on the screening committee, there are many other ways that we can get your thoughts on both the qualifications as well as your input on the finalists as they are presented to us. So just want to give a quick update on that.
Great. So let's go on to the, you all done, Susan? Or?
I am.
Okay. Let's go on to, where are we now? We're under Roman 3, approval of minutes, and we have the February 1 deliberative session minutes, which I read through. Does anybody have any thoughts, changes, edits? Nothing? Okay, may I have a motion to approve the February 1, 2020 deliberative session minutes?
So moved.
Second?
Second.
All right, seconds. Any further comments? If none, all those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
And similarly, for the February 6 minutes, I have to abstain. I was not there.
I
make a
approve.
motion to accept February 6th, 2020 public minutes.
I just wanted to add something to those minutes.
Mhm.
if possible. So we talked about the NESDEC, the process, and all of that, and I recall that I asked if this was a new process, if this was something that had been done before, or if this was typically the way the searches had been done. And so I just wanted to add that we addressed that issue, that it was something that had, and it's in there that you had said that this is something you enjoyed working with them in the past. But I just wanted to clarify that.
Well, and I think that this is one of those things, it wouldn't have mattered what we did. If we had chosen to do it ourselves, we would have been criticized. If we had not chosen NESDEC, we would have been so it's, the way I looked at it last week and the way I explained it, there's no skin in the game. It's not us. It's not Susan. It's not the school board. It is going to be NESDEC picking those people, and then the committee making the finalists. That's why we did what we did.
It's also pragmatic, right? And NASDAQ does this before. We have, as we repeatedly said, we're understaffed right now,
Yeah.
and this is a lot of coordination to schedule the interviews, to get the committees doing their things and doing those things, and then NASDAQ also has a large network of people that they can advertise to. It's kind of an easy one, so. So we got a motion. Did we have a second on that one?
I
No.
second.
Any further edits? If none, all those in favor, please say aye.
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 And one abstention. And the approval of the manifests. We need to sign those before we leave.
I move that we approve the total of all manifests of $564,761.90.
Is there a second?
Second?
All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye, it's unanimous. And we're moving on to, there's a job description for the part-time nurse.
Yes. So, you've had a part-time nurse in the past, and that was a position that was cut, but we have a lot of students with medical needs at the elementary school, and we are finding that, we need additional support there. So we would like to be able to advertise for a part-time position, the money to pay for this. There's been a number of para-positions. In spite of all of our efforts to fill them, we have been unsuccessful, and so they're available in the budget to pay for this aid position for the remainder of the year. It will take, and provide, the idea is to provide the nurse, with some support, as well as the administration and the teachers, so that when the student has medical needs, if the nurse has to leave that area and somebody else has a medical need, that there's somebody there to cover. Also, if we have field trips at either building, this would allow us to have, and a nurse is needed, then this would allow us to have a person that could do that without pulling our nurses out of the building. So it's an area that is essential. We've tried to get by without that, and it's just gotten to the point where we feel that, for many reasons that I've described, that we would like to move forward with this. So.
It's an interruption of learning, because you're pulling a para, you're pulling a teacher, you're pulling somebody to help the nurse. And so it's the constant interruption of learning, which we're starting to, noticing. So I think it's an important position.
And also the students that require this level of medical care, I think it's doing a disservice to them to not have someone better able to do it without taking away someone from someone else,
Right.
something from someone else. It's just vital, I think.
So with your approval tonight, then we will post the position along with a whole host of other positions.
I make a motion to accept the job description of the health aide part-time.
I second.
Any further discussion? All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye, it's unanimous. And then we have a donation from the United Way of Massachusetts and Merrimack Valley is the next item, and that's for the Youth to Youth program, which is, and there's a description of that in our packet. I know, I think Taylor was in that group for the first couple of years and it was very valuable. I've heard good things about the program. Anybody have any observations, questions about that donation before we make a motion?
No, as usual, I love when people donate money.
Yeah.
Well, the program's laid out here too.
Yep.
So that what will be done with it, so
Right.
that, I like that too.
Mm-hmm. Okay, can I have a motion to accept the donation in the amount of $1,425 from the United Way of Massachusetts Valley for the Youth to Youth program?
So moved.
Second.
All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Thank you for that donation. And a letter will go out thanking them as well. And then, under section E, we have nomination of coaches. That's close to the last thing in our packet. And Susan, why don't you explain that? And
Yes, so your board policy states that, that the hiring process or the appointment process happens every season, and that, the interviews for any open positions, are done by the principal and the athletic director, and then, the principal does the references and then makes a recommendation and brings it to me, but it ultimately says that, that I make the nomination to you, but the board approves, the appointment of the coaches. So I know this is new, perhaps because as I'm reading through policies, I'm becoming more and more familiar with them. So I'm trying to implement them as they're written, even if they weren't implemented in the past. So, so this is the process identified in your policy, and so that's why you're seeing them here tonight. And kind of warding off your question about why are we seeing these when we hadn't in the past, but that's the reason.
so we have some nominations before us for coaches, and I'd seek a motion to accept those nominations.
So moved?
I second.
And I don't know if we have to list them off. They're in our packet. They're for varsity baseball, junior high softball, and varsity track. I'd like to say, though,
One on the back.
and yes, and I'm sorry, Todd Berry for softball, varsity softball. That's great. I just for any kids who played sports in high school, and I know from attending both days of the swim meet, it has such an impact on kids' lives, and just in addition to teachers and whatnot, and oftentimes coaches they do receive stipends, but it's nowhere near the amount of time often that they put into it, and it really it's a valuable part of the learning process. So I just want to thank the coaches for doing that, and it's a big commitment. And with that said, if there's no other comment,
Wait, and part of that new budget too has a line item for coaches, if I'm correct?
The increase there is for, I think, busing and other expenses that have gone
Okay.
up. Yeah.
so with that said, any other comments? Or if none, all those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Kim, were you gonna?
Yeah, do we have a motion?
We did, I thought so.
Because I thought, so we're including all four of the five?
Let's try this again. It's 9
Okay.
o'clock, 9:15. We might not have had a motion. May we now have a motion?
I have a motion that we accept the nominations for the 5 coaches for the junior, senior high school.
Second.
All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
It's unanimous. Thanks again. And it doesn't look like we have any other business.
Nope.
Okay. Well, may I have a motion to adjourn then?
So moved?
I second.
All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
We're now adjourned.